Welcome. This is Her America. I'm your host, Chaida. According to a lot of people, articles, and studies, the future is homeschooling, and I cannot love it more. Today, I'm going to be talking about why homeschooling is becoming so popular, as well as school choice. And I think a lot of people should support school choice. I think a good number of Americans do, but there's some that argue against it. And some of their points might be valid, but despite of it all, I still believe in school choice. Back in 2022, I did a campaign job for school choice efforts. I was basically canvassing in different areas in Virginia, knocking on doors, passing pamphlets, just motivating people. It was actually around election time in Virginia. I was basically motivating people to vote for candidates who promote school choice efforts. It was such a formative time for me because I was able to connect with a lot of different people from wildly different backgrounds. And I really decided to do a deep study into this because I really wanted to come to this table today and be able to provide resources and information on why school choice is so important. But what is school choice? Well, based on this definition, the concept of school choice is to allow public education funds to follow the students to the schools or services that best tailor to their needs. So the money doesn't go directly to the public schools. It instead follows the kids, and whether if that kid's education is going to take place in a public school, private school, charter, or homeschooling, they will be able to excel well in their education because the money is there is going to be spending to their tailored needs instead of having a one-size-fits-all model. And research has shown that school choice is the more sensible option. School choice saves taxpayers money. It allows better academic outcomes for students. School choice helps bridge gaps and disadvantages that we see in the public school systems. So with students who come from low income backgrounds or learning disabilities, school choice helps bridge those gaps so that way no student falls through the cracks. And it also creates better learning environments in public schools so teachers are not hassled with dealing with a classroom with more than 30 students when some of those students probably could excel better in a place outside of public schools. These are some of the reasons why I support school choice efforts. But today is not about school choice. It's about homeschooling and why it's becoming very, very popular. There is an article by the Reason Foundation titled "Homeschooling is on the Rise Even as the Pandemic Recedes." As you all know, back in 2020, when the pandemic began and everything shut down. Schools obviously had to close and revert to Zoom and online learning, which wasn't successful. There are a lot of students who are still not accounted for even after Zoom and online learning was over and students were going back to school. The Reason Foundation did an article focusing on why parents are leaving the public school system and resorting to homeschooling. And in the article, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm going to read a part where it says, nationwide, the Household Pulse survey estimates that in May 2023, 85% of students are enrolled in public schools, 9.6% attend private schools, and 5.4% are homeschooled. HPS figures aren't directly comparable to data collected by the National Household Education Survey by the United States Census Bureau due to methodological differences, but suggest that the homeschooling rate has increased substantially from 2019, pre-pandemic, when 2.8% of students learned at home. Research published by the Urban Institute supports a surge, finding that homeschooling increased by 30% between the 2019 to 2020 school year and 2021 to 2022 school years in the states examined. Later on in the article, it shows a chart of parents who did a survey with the National Center for Education Statistics to highlight some of the reasons why they decided to leave the public school system and curate their kids' education for themselves and decide to homeschool. And in the article, it lists the most important reasons why these parents decide to homeschool. 25% of them said concern about the school environment. 14.5% shared how they were dissatisfied with the academic instructions happening in the schools. 14% said it was for other reasons. It doesn't specify. 13% was desire to provide religious instructions. And the list just goes so on and so forth. It talks about family life, child special needs, and being able to provide an environment where their child is being supported both emotionally and physically. Yes, so Zoom schools, or should I say pandemic Zoom schools, wasn't quite successful back in 2020 and even 2021 when schools were closed and had to resort to an online basis, because a lot of students didn't have the resources or the tools that they needed in order to be successful. And because of that, they dropped out or they just weren't accounted for during that time in the pandemic. There's also another article by the New York Post that shares a very important issue that we need to be talking about more. And that issue is the public schools teacher shortage. So many teachers, especially this year, and we're just only in March, are leaving the public school system. And some of the reasons are valid. Among those reasons, it's low pay, overworking, working very long hours for little pay. There's little administration support, meaning that they cannot get enough support from the administrative team, students' behaviors and how there are little consequences for it, and just overall low satisfaction from the job. In the New York Post article, it's titled, "Teachers are quitting in droves because they're scared of student violence and a lack of punishment." And in the article, I'm going to read it. It says, "It was getting to the point that it was scary. There were a few days that I was scared to go to school." Stacy Sawyer, a former 8th grade teacher from Cape Coral, Florida, told the Post. The veteran teacher, 55, quit last June, she said, after student misbehavior spiraled out of control following the pandemic. Fights regularly broke out, ending with the teachers hit and punched, and one student allegedly hospitalized after being slammed on the ground. Even though I ran a really tight classroom, the disrespect just skyrocketed. Probably 75% of my time was dealing with discipline, Sawyer said. The stress of it was just too much. I even hated just driving down the road to school. I didn't want to go anymore. So after 30 years in the classroom, Sawyer decided enough was enough. She now owns a small art studio. Good for her. I'm glad that this former teacher, she's doing a lot better now. But she is not the only one. If you just go on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, there are so many stories about former teachers or current teachers who are leaving or working on leaving the education system because they cannot put up with these extreme behaviors that are coming from students, from the physical violence to the outright disrespect. They're dealing with this, and also the fact that administration doesn't do enough to discipline the students. So they're quitting, and nobody blames them. But this also will impact the public school system because as more teachers leave, who's going to be left to be able to teach the students? And as more parents are resorting to homeschooling option, what is going to be left of the public school system? Is public schools going to be a thing of the past? Maybe. Let's make change now. Let's start getting aggressive about making very proactive changes in our education system. I think from the top down, we need to do away with the Department of the Education System or the Department of Education because they are doing nothing to help public schools or to help teachers and students alike. And I think the moment we dismantle the Department of Education, we can then start focusing on local communities and districts to help their students who live within those communities and build an education foundation that will help their community. And what that means is, I think that if we just did away with having to have huge regulations about how public schools are run, and just allow more local and more community support on how public schools are run, I think we might see a better outcome in our public school system, as well as kids being able to have a great education. And another thing, I am going to bring it up again, school choice. I think we need to have a lot more school choice efforts in the United States. And as long as I am here, I am always going to be behind parents being able to have a direction in their kids' education system. That is something that just should have partisan support on. Like there should be no like if, ands, or buts around it. That just should be something that should always be implicated, that parents know their kids and will have the best interest in their kids' well-being. So with that being said, homeschooling is popular regardless of what anybody says, and I love it. Thank you for listening. This has been Her America.